They sent a bill for the light in our sky. Commander Eva Rostova stood on the command deck of the UNS Lex Talionis. Her ship was a promise forged in cold orbital docks, an arbiter built for a galaxy that preferred contracts to cannons. Below her, the blue-white marble of Earth hung like a jewel on black velvet. The only shadow upon it was the one cast by the Cathar Dominion's ultimatum. It hadn't arrived as a hail of plasma or a crackle of decloaking warships. It came as a data packet, a simple, elegant, and utterly obscene invoice delivered to every public terminal in the Sol system. The demand was a gratitude tithe for the Cathar's self-appointed stewardship of human space. The price they had placed on their unsolicited protection was staggering. A figure designed to break a civilization's back without firing a single shot. A public inquiry was humanity's only path forward. This was not a war of fleets, but a battle for the very definition of justice. The ship's mind. Solon manifested as a column of calm, golden light near the forward viewport. Its voice was serene, a counterpoint to the simmering anger on the bridge. The Cathar legal framework is predicated on the doctrine of assumed reciprocity. They offer a service note, its acceptance, and then generate a debt. Silence is interpreted as consent. Silence is what you get before you punch a bully in the mouth, Lieutenant Jin Eva's legal officer muttered from his station. He was young, sharp, and carried the weight of Terran law on his shoulders. Their doctrine is a predator's excuse. Eva set her voice tight. She kept her gaze fixed on the homeworld below, a world now technically in arrears. They patrol our borders unasked. They observe our colonies uninvited. Now they demand payment for the privilege of being watched. She turned from the viewport, the fire in her eyes reflecting in the polished deck plates. The first step was not to fight, but to force their method into the light. The path to victory was paved not with wreckage, but with receipts. A young girl on Mars traced the strange alien symbols of the Cathar tithe notice that had appeared on her school's public data slate. Her father, a terraformer, had tried to explain it. He said it was like someone painting your house a color you didn't want, then demanding you pay for the paint and their time. She didn't understand the numbers, but she understood the worry in her father's eyes. The Concordat Charter is clear, Jin stated, his fingers dancing across a holographic legal text. Article 42.7 prohibits unconscionable contracts. We can petition for a public inquiry based on the sheer scale of the demand. It's a long shot. They'll claim cultural precedent. Then we challenge their precedent. Eva countered, moving towards the central command chair. Solon began a full-spectrum analysis. I want to know everything about the Cathar's history with this gratitude tithe. Find every species they have assisted. Cross-reference their economic growth against the tithe's imposition. I want a ledger of their benevolence. Solon's light pulsed softly. The task is underway, Commander. Initial projections suggest a pattern. Of the 12 civilizations known to have accepted Cathar stewardship, 8 have seen their interstellar economies annexed within 3 generations. They are not conquerors. They are cosmic landlords. A collar of gratitude is still a collar. Eva settled into her chair, the cool synth leather a familiar comfort. They've wrapped extortion in the language of law, so we will unwrap it with the same. We will not file a declaration of war. We will file a petition for discovery. We will ask them in the full view of the Galactic Concordat to teach us the mathematics of their mercy. It was a dangerous gambit, a courtroom maneuver conducted from the bridge of a warship. The Cathar would see it as an insult. She was counting on it. Their arrogance would be the fulcrum she used to move them. Eva knew that true power wasn't just the ability to destroy an enemy. It was the power to make an enemy destroy themselves. On a trading station orbiting Jupiter, a human merchant argued with a Xylan customs official. The Xylon A, being of crystalline facets and clicking mandibles, pointed a claw at the red icon now flashing next to the human ship's registry. Pledged asset, the translator chirped. Pending Dominion tithe. Cargo is forfeit until debt is cleared. The human's face went pale. His ship, his cargo, his entire livelihood was now just a line item on an alien invoice. The Cathar response was faster than Eva had anticipated. It was not a formal reply to their petition, but a system-wide legal maneuver of breathtaking audacity. They placed a lien against the entire Sol system. Every ship, every station, every asteroid mine, every off-world colony, all were declared collateral against the outstanding debt. The gratitude tithe had escalated to a gratitude hostage. Humanity was now a prisoner in its own home, legally blockaded by an enemy who hadn't moved a single vessel. This was their method, a quiet strangulation by galactic law. "They've firewalled us," Jin said, his voice a low whisper of disbelief. He gestured to the main screen, which now showed a cascading series of trade alerts and impoundment notices from across Concordat space. Any human asset that touches a signatory port is being flagged. They are using the Concordat's own enforcement protocols against us. They're not breaking the law, they're wielding it. Their precision is admirable, Solon noted, its golden light unwavering. The legal architecture is flawless. They have weaponized bureaucracy. To resist with force would be to declare ourselves outlaws, validating their claim on our assets as a punitive measure. Eva's knuckles were white, where she gripped the armrest of her chair. The anger was a cold, hard knot in her chest. This was the precipice. One step in the wrong direction, one flash of temper, and her species would be branded as pirates. Another step, and they would become slaves. "They think they've cornered us," she said softly. "They believe we have only two choices, fight and be condemned, or submit and be consumed. But there was a third path, a human path. Justice is not a weapon. It is a mirror held up to the crime." She rose and walked to the edge of the command platform, looking down at the crew. Their faces were grim, reflecting the same trapped feeling that echoed through her. "The Cathar have made a critical error," she announced, her voice ringing with a newfound clarity. "They have presented us with a bill for their services. They have meticulously documented their actions, their patrols, their stewardship. They have created a paper trail of their own unsolicited intervention." Jin looked up, a flicker of understanding in his eyes. "A receipt." "Exactly," Eva affirmed. "They've given us the one thing we needed most, an admission of their presence. They have legally bound themselves to their actions, and we are going to hold them to it." Her plan began to form not a strategy of warfare, but one of radical, aggressive accounting. They would not reject the bill. They would audit it. The Lex Talionis was not just a ship of the line. It was a public ledger with engines. An old man sat in a public park in what was once London, watching his grandchild play. On his wrist, his personal comm unit chimed with an alert from his pension fund. A significant portion had been garnished with the destination listed as Cathar Dominion Gratitude Tithe. He looked at his grandchild, so full of life, and felt a profound, chilling fear. He had survived one war, but he didn't know how to fight an accountant. The first step was to compel the Cathar to speak. Eva's petition for discovery, initially a request, was now refiled as a demand for a preliminary hearing. She cited the Concordat's Corridor of Law provision, a rarely used protocol that forces two parties to meet in a neutral, publicly broadcast forum to establish the grounds for a full tribunal. It was a procedural ambush. To refuse the corridor would be a tacit admission that their claim lacked substance, an act that would undermine their carefully crafted legal standing. "They have accepted," Solon announced a day later. "The Cathar Ambassador Lord Adjudicator Cavrel will meet us at the designated coordinates. The corridor will be broadcast on all public Concordat channels." They're walking into it. Jin breathed a grin spreading across his face. They're too arrogant to see the trap. It is not a trap if the door is open and the path is clearly marked, Eva corrected him gently. We are simply asking them to walk their chosen path, but to do so with an audience. We will give them the grandest stage in the galaxy to explain their philosophy. This fleet teaches by numbers and remembers by ledgers, never by collars. The corridor of law was not a physical place, but a secured channel, a virtual space rendered with austere formality. Eva stood on her bridge, the image of Lord Adjudicator Cavrel shimmering opposite her. The Cathar was an imposing figure, encased in ornate segmented armor that hinted at both his warrior caste and his bureaucratic rank. His face was a mask of placid superiority. Behind him, the opulent bridge of his flagship was visible, a testament to the wealth his people had accumulated. Commander Rostova Cavrel began, his voice a low, resonant hum. You have invoked this archaic ritual. For what purpose? To delay the inevitable settlement of your species' debt. The tithe is a matter of established dominion law, a tradition of uplift and order. Eva met his gaze without flinching. Her uniform was simple, practical. The bridge of the Lex Talionis was functional, not ornate. The contrast was deliberate. Lord Adjudicator, we have not requested this forum to dispute our debt. We have requested it to understand it. Your laws are new to us, your traditions unfamiliar. We wish to be educated so that we may pay our tithe with the proper gratitude it deserves. The words tasted like ash in her mouth, but they were the necessary key. Show them the respect they believe they are owed. Cavrel's mandibles clicked in a gesture Eva's cultural database identified as condescending approval. A wise, if belated, sentiment. Very well. Ask your questions. The Dominion is always pleased to instruct a younger race in the ways of the galaxy. Thank you, Eva said, her voice even. Our query is simple. The gratitude tithe is calculated based on the services your Dominion provides. For the public record, for the benefit of all who watch, could you please describe these services in detail? Explain to us and to the Concordat the full measure of your benevolent stewardship. This was the moment, the pivot. She had not accused him of a crime. She had invited him to boast. And Cavrel, blinded by a cultural arrogance centuries in the making, took the bait completely. He launched into a grand, sweeping monologue, detailing the Cathar's self-appointed role as galactic guardians. He spoke of their patrols, which brought stability. He spoke of their economic oversight, which prevented market volatility. He spoke of their cultural archives, which preserved the histories of lesser species. He was, in his own words, a generous caretaker. He was confessing to everything. The cost of hubris is always paid in full. A family on the agricultural world of New Harmony watched the broadcast. They were colonists, their hands calloused from working the rich soil. They listened as the alien lord described his people's actions. The farmer turned to his wife. He's talking about them like we're livestock, he said, his voice heavy. He's proud of the quality of his fence. As Cavrel spoke, Solon worked. Every claim the Lord Adjudicator made was logged, time-stamped, and cross-referenced. Each patrol route he described, each act of oversight he proudly detailed was converted into a line item. Energy expenditure, resource allocation, man-hours, computational cycles, all of it was being meticulously calculated. The Cathar ambassador was not just giving a speech, he was itemizing his own invoice for them. He was building the weapon that would be used against him. Our watchfulness is constant, Commander Cavrel was saying, his voice swelling with self-importance. Our fleets maintain a vigilant presence on your borders, ensuring no external threats disrupt your nascent development. This security, this peace of mind is a gift beyond price. And yet you have priced it, Eva interjected smoothly, her tone one of genuine curiosity. That is what we find so remarkable. Your ability to quantify the unquantifiable. Could you elaborate on the formula? How does one calculate the cost of a vigilant presence? Cavrel hesitated for a fraction of a second, the first sign of uncertainty. The question was unexpected. He had expected arguments, protests, anger. He had not expected a request for his accounting methodology. The calculations are complex, he evaded. They involve projections of potential threats, energy audits of patrol squadrons, the amortization of capital ships. We would be honored to learn, Eva pressed her voice relentlessly polite. Humanity has always valued education. Please teach us. We would not want to remain ignorant of the true depth of our debt. Every word was a carefully placed stone building the walls of the legal prison higher around him. An honest ledger is the most brutal of weapons. The Lord Adjudicator's placid demeanor finally began to fray. The audience was galactic. He could not refuse to answer without appearing evasive, without suggesting that his people's foundational legal doctrine was a sham. He was trapped by his own performance of superiority. Reluctantly, he began to sketch out the basics of the tithe calculation, revealing the core assumptions and metrics the Dominion used. He was giving them the keys to his kingdom, believing he was only showing them the fancy lock on the door. The Inquirer was no longer about a debt. It was about the very legitimacy of the Dominion's power. On the bridge of the Lex Talionis, Lieutenant Jin watched the data scroll across his console. Solon was modeling the Cathar formulas in real time, inputting the ambassador's own words as variables. A new figure was beginning to resolve at the bottom of the screen, a number that was both an answer and a devastating counterclaim. Commander Jin whispered, his eyes wide. It's working. He's giving us everything. Eva gave a subtle, almost imperceptible nod. The first phase of her plan was complete. The Cathar had spoken their method into the public record. They had, with their own mouths, built the case against themselves. Now it was time for the second phase. It was time for humanity to pay its bill. The universe would now learn that humanity's gratitude was a thing to be feared. The mirror was about to be turned. The corridor of law transmission ended. Cavrel signed off with a final smug warning about the penalties for late payment. He believed he had won, that he had successfully demonstrated Cathar magnanimity and human obligation to the entire Concordat. He could not have been more wrong. The moment his image vanished, the atmosphere on Eva's bridge shifted from quiet tension to focused electric energy. Solon status of the ledger, Eva commanded, her voice crisp and clear. The ledger is complete, Commander, the AI responded. Its golden light seemed to burn brighter. Every service claimed by Lord Adjudicator Cavrel has been logged. Every patrol vector, every surveillance hour, every administrative projection has been quantified based on the methodologies he provided. We have a complete and itemized accounting of the Cathar Dominion's unsolicited stewardship of the Sol system for the past 50 standard years. And the final cost, Jin asked, leaning forward in his chair. Calculated to the last joule of energy and the last unit of currency, Solon confirmed. It is a significant sum. Eva looked at the main view screen where the star-dusted black of space had replaced the Cathar's arrogant face. Then it is time to settle our account. She turned to her helm officer. Lay in a course for the Cathar's primary accounting nexus in the Argosy cluster. Maximum sustainable velocity. She paused, then added, and broadcast our intentions on an open channel to the Concordat. Inform them that the United Nations ship Lex Talionis is en route to tender full payment for services rendered by the Cathar Dominion. There is no justice in a secret court. The message sent ripples across the galactic networks. A human warship traveling not to the Cathar military headquarters or their homeworld, But to their central financial hub, it was a move no one understood. Pundits and military analysts across a dozen species debated its meaning. Was it a prelude to a targeted strike, an act of economic warfare, or was it, as the message claimed, a simple payment delivery? The ambiguity of the act was its own form of psychological pressure. Aboard his flagship, Cavrel received the news with a dismissive sneer, a stunt he declared to his aides, a desperate final gesture of defiance before they capitulate. They think to intimidate us by approaching our ledgers. Let them come. They will find our accounting is as unassailable as our fleets. He saw their move as a sign of weakness, a tacit admission that they could not challenge the debt itself. He had forgotten Eva's relentless focus on his methods. He had mistaken her courtesy for surrender. He did not realize the numbers were already aimed at his throat. The journey to the Argosy cluster took 3 days. For the crew of the Lex Talionis, it was a period of intense, quiet preparation. They were not drilling for battle. They were refining a single, massive data transaction. Engineers were not charging weapon capacitors. They were calibrating the ship's primary energy transmitter for a purpose it was never designed for. They were turning a sword into a massive galaxy-spanning pen, ready to sign the most audacious check in history. A young Cathar acolyte working her first rotation at the Argosy accounting nexus monitored the incoming human vessel. She saw no signs of aggression. Its weapon ports were sealed. Its energy signatures were stable. Its communications were polite and procedural. Her superiors had assured her it was a hollow political gesture. Still, a knot of unease tightened in her gut. The humans were not acting like a defeated people. "We are in position," Commander the Helm Officer reported. The Lex Talionis had arrived at the designated coordinates a respectful distance from the colossal space station that was the heart of the Cathar's economic empire. The station, known as the Abacus, was a latticework of crystalline structures and humming energy conduits, a monument to a culture that worshipped the bottom line. "Solon, prepare the transfer," Eva ordered. Her voice was calm, but her heart was pounding. This was the point of no return. Open a direct channel to the Abacus and patch it through to the Concordate public broadcast. Everyone is going to see this. The channel opened. A Cathar administrator appeared on the screen, his expression one of weary annoyance. "UNS Lex Talionis, you were instructed to tender payment through standard channels. This direct approach is irregular." "Our payment is irregular in nature," Eva replied, her face a mask of professional calm. "We are here to reimburse the Cathar Dominion for all costs incurred during its 50 years of unsolicited stewardship. As per the testimony of Lord Adjudicator Cavrel, we have compiled a complete ledger of your services. The most dangerous threats are spoken in the language of procedure." She gestured to Jin. On the main screen, a document appeared broadcast for the entire galaxy to see. It was the bill. But it was not the Cathar's bill. It was a new one generated by Solon. It was an itemized list of every Cathar action, every patrol, every surveillance sweep, exactly as Cavrel had described them. And next to each item was a cost calculated with the Cathar's own complex formulas. "We have audited your stewardship," Eva announced, her voice ringing with the authority of absolute truth. "And we have found it to be an expense incurred on our behalf without our consent. Under the ancient human legal doctrine of negotiorum gestio, the management of another's affairs without their authority, the party who provides such a service is entitled to reimbursement for their reasonable expenses." The Cathar administrator stared, his mandibles agape. "This is absurd, is it?" Eva countered. "These are your actions. This is your methodology. We are simply applying your own legal principles. You have provided a service. We are now reimbursing you for it." She paused, letting the weight of the moment settle. "Therefore, we are transmitting payment in full." not in currency which can be debated, but in the base value that underpins all galactic economy's energy. She turned to her tactical officer. Execute the transfer. From the forward emitter of the Lex Talionis, a beam of pure, coherent energy lanced out. It was not a weapon. It was not destructive. It was a tightly controlled, perfectly measured stream of power calibrated to the exact total of Solon's ledger. It struck the abacus's primary energy reception matrix, a system designed to receive titanic amounts of power from the stars it harvested. The station's own systems, designed for massive intake, automatically drew the energy in, logging it as a standard transfer. Transfer in progress, Solon stated calmly. The receipt with all itemized calculations is being written to the Concordat public ledger. Every member of the galactic community can now see the precise cost of Cathar friendship. On worlds hundreds of light years away, legal scholars and common citizens alike watched in stunned silence. It was a move of such breathtaking legal jujutsu that it bordered on performance art. The humans were not refusing the bill. They were paying the Cathar back for everything they had ever done, using their own logic as the justification. They were returning the cost. They were mirroring the transaction. A debt paid is a debt acknowledged. The energy beam continued, a steady, unwavering stream of light. It was the physical manifestation of 50 years of intrusion. It was the price of being watched. Every joule transmitted was a joule the Lex Talionis had to pull from its own core, a cost to her own ship, her own resources. It was a sacrifice, but it was a necessary one. This was not a gift. It was a refund. And it came with a receipt for the entire galaxy to see a permanent record of the transaction. The Cathar had wanted to teach humanity its place. Instead, humanity was teaching the galaxy how to read a price tag. Lord Adjudicator Cavrel watched from his flagship, his smugness having evaporated into cold, horrified fury. He was watching his entire legal and cultural framework being dismantled not by force, but by its own internal logic. The humans had not fought him. They had agreed with him so hard it had become a weapon. He had boasted of his people's constant vigilance, and now the humans were paying him for it, turning his boast into a billable service. They had turned his shield into a cage. The truth once spoken cannot be unsaid. The energy transfer continued for 10 full minutes, a silent, brilliant spectacle in the void. It was more than a payment. It was a statement. It was a declaration that humanity would not be a victim. They would not be debtors. If a price was to be placed on their existence, they would be the ones to write the check. The beam finally ceased. The silence that followed was more profound than any explosion. Transfer complete, Solon announced. The abacus has acknowledged receipt of payment. The public ledger has been updated and cryptographically sealed. The transaction is a permanent part of the Concordat's legal history. On the screen, the Cathar administrator was gone, replaced by a simple system-generated confirmation. Payment received. Ava let out a breath she didn't realize she had been holding. Her hands were steady. Her resolve was firm. But the cost was real. The Lex Talionis's energy reserves were now dangerously low. They were vulnerable adrift in the heart of enemy territory. It was a calculated risk, the price of this victory. A win is only a win if you are there to see it, Commander Jin said, his voice hushed with awe. What have we just done? Eva Rostova looked at the abacus, that monument to predatory accounting, now a silent recipient of its own medicine. We have honored our obligations, she said. We have settled our account. And we have issued a mirror. She turned back to her crew, her eyes hard as diamonds. Now, we wait for their response. We have shown them the consequences of their actions. Let us see if they have learned anything. The board was reset. The opening move was over. and the galaxy held its breath waiting to see what would happen when a bully was handed a receipt for his own behavior, a bill for his own bad faith. The age of the easy tithe was over. The age of the public audit had begun. The Cathar response was not long in coming. But it was not what Eva or anyone else had expected. There was no fleet movement, no angry declaration of war. There was only a profound, echoing silence from the Dominion. Their internal networks were in chaos. The human move had been so outside their established paradigms that their entire command structure was paralyzed with indecision. How do you retaliate against an opponent who has just paid you? How do you attack someone for aggressively agreeing with you? But the true battle was now being fought in the court of public opinion. On every concordant world, the broadcast of the payment was being analyzed. Legal experts marveled at the audacity. Philosophers debated the ethics. But for the common citizen, the message was simple and powerful. The great and powerful Cathar Dominion, the self-styled landlords of the galaxy, had been forced to accept a refund for their own unsolicited services. Their mystique of unassailable authority was shattered. The Emperor had been revealed to have no clothes, only an invoice. Several of the species currently under Cathar stewardship began to stir. Inspired by the humans' actions, they began their own audits. They filed petitions citing the human precedent. They demanded to know the cost of their own protection. The Cathar's legal empire, built on the unquestioned acceptance of their authority, was beginning to crumble from within. A single ledger entry had become a revolution. The cost of a lie is that you have to keep paying it. Aboard the Lex Talionis, the mood was one of wary triumph. They had won the engagement, but the war for their sovereignty was far from over. Their energy reserves were slowly regenerating, but they remained vulnerable. "They are quiet," Jin observed, staring at the tactical display. "Too quiet." "They are calculating," Solon corrected. "The Cathar do not act on emotion. They are processing this new variable. They are assessing the damage to their reputation and the potential for further dissent among their tributaries. They will conclude that we are the source of the infection and that we must be sterilized. Then we must be ready," Eva said. She knew the other shoe was about to drop. The Cathar would not engage her in a legal debate again. They had been humiliated in that arena. Their next move would be more direct. It would be designed to bypass the law to create a situation where force was the only possible response. They needed to make humanity the aggressor. The alert came an hour later. It wasn't a Cathar fleet, but a distress call. A civilian freighter, a human ship called the Stargazer, was under attack in a nearby sector. It was being targeted by pirates. But the pirates were flying ships of a design that Solon immediately flagged as Cathar auxiliary raiders. They were Proxy's deniable assets. "It's a trap," Jin stated flatly. "They want us to intervene. If we fire on those ships, they'll claim we attacked a Dominion patrol. If we don't, the Stargazer is destroyed and they prove that our vaunted human spirit is a sham. They win either way." On the view screen, the Stargazer's desperate call for help was a raw, terrified plea. A man's face, etched with fear, looked out at them. "This is Captain Harris of the freighter Stargazer. We're hauling medical supplies for the New Harmony colony. We're being torn apart. Can anyone hear us?" His voice was a stark reminder of the real stakes. This wasn't about ledgers and legal theory anymore. It was about lives. Here was the second great escalation. The Cathar had changed the game from the courtroom to a dark alley. They had manufactured a crisis designed to force Eva's hand, to make her choose between her principles and her people. Her moral line was being tested against the cold calculus of survival. Eva looked at the faces of her crew. She saw their conflict, their desire to charge in, and their understanding of the trap. She felt it herself, a burning need to act. But a military response was what the Cathar wanted. It would invalidate everything they had accomplished. It would turn their legal victory into a footnote in a war they would surely lose. There had to be another way. There always was. A cage is only a cage if you don't see the key. Salone Eva said, her voice dangerously quiet. Get me a line to Captain Harris, now. The connection was shaky, filled with static, and the sounds of weapons fire. Captain Harris, this is Commander Rostova of the UNS Lex Talionis. We are receiving your distress call. We are on our way. Thank God, Harris cried, his relief palpable. Hurry, our shields are failing. Captain Eva continued, her voice steady and clear, a rock in the storm. I need you to do something for me. I need you to open your cargo manifest. I need you to eject your primary cargo pod, the one with the medical supplies. There was a moment of confused silence. Eject the cargo, Commander. That's our entire delivery. It's worth a fortune. Your lives are worth more, Captain Eva said firmly. This is not about the cargo. This is about the law. She turned to her communications officer. Broadcast this on all channels, unencrypted, open to the entire Concordat. She then looked back at the screen at the terrified face of Captain Harris. The Cathar have a legal right to stop and inspect ships they believe are violating their blockade, but they have no legal right to destroy civilian vessels or seize medical supplies which are protected under Concordat humanitarian law. She was changing the rules again. She was refusing to play their game of violence. Instead, she was creating a new legal and moral dilemma for the pirates. Jettison the cargo, Captain Eva repeated. Let us see what they do. Let the galaxy see what they do. Are they pirates interested in plunder, or are they something else? She was placing the burden of the next move back onto her enemy. The universe was watching. The pirates could take the cargo and leave, revealing their true nature as looters. Or they could destroy the helpless ship anyway, proving they were not pirates at all, but assassins acting on orders. They were caught in a mirror of their own making. On the bridge of the Stargazer, Captain Harris stared at his screen, his face a canvas of disbelief and terror. Jettison the medicine. She wants me to. She's insane. His first mate grabbed his arm. Sir, listen to her. The whole galaxy is watching this channel. What's she playing at? Harris hesitated for another heartbeat, the ship groaning under another weapon's impact. He looked at the faces of his crew, their lives hanging on his decision. He slammed his hand on the console. Do it, jettison the primary medical pod. Now, deep in space, a large white cargo pod marked with the Red Cross of humanitarian aid was ejected from the freighter's belly. It tumbled slowly, a beacon of vulnerability in the black. For a moment, the pirate ships ceased their fire. They had been given a target of immense value, a prize for the taking. The entire Concordat watched, waiting to see what choice they would make. It was a test laid bare for all to see. A principle is only a principle if it holds when it's inconvenient. The lead raider, its hull scarred and brutal, ignored the drifting cargo. It adjusted its vector slightly and fired its main cannons again, not at the pod, but directly at the Stargazer's crippled engine section. The act was unmistakable, a declaration broadcast across 1,000,000 worlds. It was not a robbery, it was an execution. They didn't want the cargo, they wanted the silence of the crew. There it is, Eva whispered on her bridge. The admission, the proof in the deed. She turned her expression as cold and hard as the void outside. Helm, get us between them. Tactical, divert all available power to forward shields. Project a full defensive wall. You are not to fire a single shot. You are to become a barrier. The Lex Talionis, its energy reserves already strained, surged forward. It was not an attack run. It was an act of interposition, the move of a peacekeeper, not a warrior. The human ship, sleek and gray physically, placed itself in the line of fire, its shields flaring into brilliant life as they absorbed the pirates' volley. The impact shuddered through the deck plates. The lights flickered a tangible cost for a moral stand. Shields at 70%, and dropping the tactical officer reported, his voice tight. They are concentrating fire. Solon, are you recording this? Eva asked, her eyes locked on the raider ships. Every microsecond is being logged and authenticated on the public concordate ledger, the AI confirmed. Their weapon signatures, their flight patterns, their deliberate targeting of a civilian vessel after ignoring its jettisoned cargo. The legal term is spoliation of evidence with extreme prejudice. They are not just committing a crime, they are attempting to erase the witness. Justice requires a witness. On the main screen, the pirate vessels faced with a shielded warship they could not damage, and a public record of their war crimes broke off their attack. They turned and fled into the dark, their mission a catastrophic failure. They had not destroyed the freighter. They had destroyed the Cathar's plausible deniability. A wave of cheers erupted on the Lex Talionis bridge. Jin slammed his fist on his console in triumph. We did it. We saved them, and we have the evidence. Eva allowed herself a small, grim smile. The cost had been high. The ship's energy was now at a critical level, barely enough to maintain life support and sublight travel. They were a lamb in a wolf's den, having scared off one predator only to announce their weakness to the true monster. Their trap failed, she said, her voice cutting through the celebration. Now they know we will not be baited into a fight. Their next move will not be so subtle. Their failure was not an end. It was a prelude. Aboard his flagship, Cavrel smashed a crystalline data slate against a bulkhead. The facade of the calm superior adjudicator was gone, replaced by a raw, seething fury. The humans had outmaneuvered him again. They had turned his own gambit into a public indictment of his methods. He had tried to frame them as aggressors, and they had instead framed him as a war criminal. The news from across the Dominion was grim. 3 more client species had formally petitioned the Concordat for an audit of their tithes, citing the human precedent. His empire of paper and fear was beginning to burn at the edges. They are a disease, he hissed to his subordinates. A plague of litigation and defiance. They have left me no choice. He could not crush them with law. He could not trick them into war. There was only one option left: overwhelm them with a truth they could not fight, the simple truth of superior force. Legal challenges were irrelevant when the challenger was vapor. Recall the fleet, he commanded. All of it. We will proceed to the human system and enforce the lien. Let them file their petitions from the wreckage of their world. The order sent a shockwave through the Cathar command. It was a total escalation, a move from legal coercion to open conquest. It was an admission that their preferred method had failed. But before Cavrel's order could be fully executed, a new message arrived, this one from the Concordat High Council itself. It was not a request, it was a summons. On the bridge of the Lex Talionis, the official communiqué scrolled across the main view screen. Eva read it aloud for the crew. By the authority of the assembled quorum, a formal tribunal of public inquiry is hereby convened. The United Nations of Earth as petitioner and the Cathar Dominion as respondent are commanded to appear. The charge: systemic violation of the Concordat Charter on Sovereign Rights. The Dominion's petition to enforce its lien is stayed pending the outcome of this inquiry. Jin let out a low whistle. They did it. The Concordat is actually stepping in. This is unprecedented. It is the outcome we engineered, Solon stated. Its light was dimmer now, conserving energy. The evidence from the Stargazer incident was conclusive. The Concordat had no choice but to act or risk its own legitimacy. Eva felt a sliver of cold satisfaction. She had forced the final confrontation not in a battle of fleets, but in the highest court in the galaxy. She had dragged the Cathar from the shadows of their legal ambushes and into the full, unforgiving glare of a public trial. "This is it," she said, looking at the faces of her exhausted but resolute crew. "This is where it ends, one way or another." She knew Cavrel would be there. He would be cornered, furious and more dangerous than ever. This would not be a trial of law. It would be a battle for the soul of the galaxy. The ledger was open, and the final accounting was at hand. In a small apartment on Titan, a family that had lost their savings to the Cathar lien gathered around a public broadcast screen. The father, an engineer, held his daughter's hand. "What is happening?" she asked. He looked at the screen where the symbols of the Concordat Tribunal were displayed. "The people who took our money are being asked to explain why," he said, his voice thick with a hope he hadn't felt in weeks. "They are being asked to show their work." The tribunal was a grand and terrible thing to behold. It was a virtual space, a vast, circular chamber, whose walls were a living mosaic of the faces of the Concordat Quorum, the crystalline Xylans, the gaseous Pathar scribes, the silicon-based Ool, and 100 others. At the center, 2 platforms floated in the simulated void. On one stood Commander Eva Rostova, flanked by Lieutenant Jin. Her only aid was the simple golden light of Solon. On the other platform stood Lord Adjudicator Cavrel. He was alone, his ornate armor seeming more like a cage than a symbol of power. He radiated an aura of contemptuous fury. An impartial robotic arbiter, a construct of pure law, presided. "This inquiry is convened," its synthesized voice echoed. "The petitioner, the United Nations of Earth, will present its case." Eva stepped forward. She did not raise her voice. She did not speak of injustice or tyranny. She spoke of mathematics. "Honored quorum," she began, "this is not a dispute over territory or resources. It is a dispute over an accounting error. The Cathar Dominion presented our people with an invoice for services we did not request. We have the invoice." Behind her, a holographic image of the original gratitude tithe appeared for all to see. "In the spirit of galactic law," she continued, "we sought to understand this debt." The Dominion's representative, Lord Adjudicator Cavrel, was kind enough to explain his methodology in a public forum. A recording of Cavrel's arrogant speech from the corridor of law played his own words damning him. "Using his own formulas, we audited the account and settled it. We reimbursed the Dominion for every joule of energy they expended in their unsolicited stewardship. The transaction is a matter of public record." The receipt from the abacus flashed into view. "A balanced ledger," Eva said simply. "A closed account." She paused, letting the silence hang in the vast chamber. The matter should have ended there. But the Dominion responded not with a legal counterclaim, but with violence. The full, unedited recording of the Stargazer incident now played every damning second of it. The pirates' refusal of the cargo, their relentless fire on a civilian ship, the intervention of the Lex Talionis acting as a shield. It was stark, brutal, and undeniable. This was not the act of a creditor seeking payment. It was the act of a predator attempting to silence a victim who had learned to read its contracts. She turned her gaze directly to Cavrel. "The Dominion's legal framework is a weapon. Their tithe is conquest by other means, and we are not their first victim." This was the moment. The final reveal. Solon, Eva said, "Present your findings." The golden light of the AI pulsed. Analysis complete, its serene voice announced a stark contrast to the dramatic tension. "I have cross-referenced the economic histories of all 12 civilizations known to have been placed under a gratitude tithe. The pattern is conclusive. A vast 3-dimensional chart materialized in the center of the chamber. It was a web of transactions, a river of wealth flowing from a dozen systems over centuries, all converging on a single point, the Cathar Dominion. In every instance, the tithe begins as a small percentage of gross stellar product. It grows exponentially justified by increased security needs and administrative costs. Within 3 generations, the client species economy is functionally owned by the Dominion. They are reduced to tenants in their own star systems paying rent for the light in their own sky. The numbers were not an accusation. They were a confession. The chart showed the decline of the Ganar Republic, the stripping of the Mycelian Collective's asteroid fields, the collapse of the Venturi technocracy's currency. It was a graveyard of civilizations, each with a Cathar receipt as its tombstone. The mystery was solved. The predator's method was laid bare for all to see. Cavrel watched his composure finally shattering. Lies, fabrications. You twist our traditions of benevolent guidance into a narrative of greed. We brought order to these chaotic species. We gave them stability. You gave them a collar. Eva countered, her voice rising for the first time, sharp and clear as breaking glass. You call it stewardship, but it is subjugation. You call it a tithe, but it is a drain. You have not uplifted a single species. You have bled them dry, and you have used the letter of the law to do it. She pointed at the chart, at the rivers of wealth flowing into the Dominion. The numbers do not lie. This is not stewardship. This is a harvest. A predator's only truth is its hunger. The chamber was silent. The members of the quorum looked from the damning data to the face of the enraged Cathar Lord Adjudicator. They saw the truth. It was written not in Eva's words, but in the cold, hard numbers of the ledger. They had all dealt with the Cathar, had seen their legal maneuvering, had felt the subtle pressure of their economic power. Now for the first time they saw the endgame. The Arbiter's voice cut through the silence. Lord Adjudicator Cavrel, you may present your defense. Cavrel drew himself up, a being of immense pride, backed into a corner from which there was no escape. He looked at the faces of the quorum, at the unassailable data hanging in the air. He had no defense. He had only his outrage, his belief in his people's inherent superiority. Our ways are not for you to judge, he roared. Our traditions are ancient, our authority absolute. We are the order in this chaotic galaxy, this insect species, this humanity. They have no respect. They do not know their place. They deserve to be. He caught himself, but it was too late. The threat hung in the air, unspoken, but understood by all. Eva did not respond. She did not need to. He had convicted himself. The law is a mirror, and Cavrel had just shown his true face to the entire galaxy. The Arbiter turned to the quorum. A silent vote was held, a cascade of light and data. It was swift. It was unanimous. The finding is guilty, the Arbiter declared, its voice devoid of emotion. Guilty of unconscionable contracts. Guilty of aggression by proxy. Guilty of systemic economic predation in violation of the Concordat Charter. Cavrel let out a sound of pure guttural rage. The sentence, the Arbiter continued, is not one of war, but of law. The doctrine of assumed reciprocity as practiced by the Cathar Dominion is hereby declared void and illegal under Concordat law. All existing gratitude tithes are nullified. A wave of relief and disbelief washed over the faces of observers from a dozen worlds. Their chains were broken. Furthermore, the Arbiter intoned its voice, reaching a crescendo of legal finalities. This tribunal orders a full and complete restitution. A mirror justice. The Cathar Dominion will repay every tithe it has ever collected from every signatory species. The amount will be calculated based on the Dominion's own accounting formulas, with interest compounded at the rates they themselves imposed. It was a death sentence delivered not with a cannon, but with a calculator. The Cathar's greatest weapon, their meticulous predatory accounting, had been turned upon them. Their vast wealth, the foundation of their power, would now be drained away, sent back to the worlds they had victimized. The harvest was being returned to the fields. On a newly freed mycelian colony, the first restitution payment from the Cathar arrived. It was a massive influx of refined metals and energy credits, enough to rebuild their failing infrastructure tenfold. A young mycelian looked at the confirmation on the public ledger, her spore sacs trembling with emotion. The line item didn't say restitution. It said simply, gratitude returned. Aboard the Lex Talionis, the crew watched the verdict on the main screen. They were quiet. There was no cheering, only a profound sense of exhaustion and a hard-won peace. Their ship was battered, its energy core still dangerously low, a stark reminder of the cost of their victory. They had faced down an empire without firing a shot, but they had come perilously close to annihilation. Another cost was the cold certainty that the Cathar, though legally and economically crippled, would never forget this humiliation. Humanity had not just won a case, they had made an enemy for eternity. Eva watched as the public ledger entry for the Concordat ruling blinked, its status changing to confirmed. The precedent was locked. The judgment was enforceable. The mirror arrays of the virtual courtroom, which had reflected the faces of the galaxy, slowly began to dim, their purpose served. This was what victory felt like. Not a triumphant explosion, but the quiet, steady hum of a system returning to balance. We didn't come here to punish them. We came to teach them. We taught them that every debt has two sides and that a bill can be sent back to its originator. We held up a mirror, and the reflection was a perfect and terrible justice. A ledger, after all, is just a story told in numbers, and we had finally made them count the true cost of their actions. Their gratitude was returned in full.